Hi, my name is Mason Beliski from Oklahoma State University, and I will be showing you how to complete Form 1, which is the checklist for adult sponsor of the ISEF. So first is the student's name, and if the project involves a team, put all team member names. So I'll just put a student's name. And then the project title, I will just put a random project title. And then the first checkbox is I have reviewed the ISEF rules and guidelines. Once you have done so, you can check this box, but if you have not done so, you can go to any web browser and search ISEF rules and guidelines and find the version for your year. Mine is 2020, 2021, and check the box when it's done. Box 2, I have reviewed the student's completed student checklist, which is Form 1A of the ISEF. It's found on page 31. It looks like this. Student checklist. And then the research plan and project summary. The research plan and project summary, if there's a lack of detail, it is the #1 SRC issue with student projects, just a lack of detail. So these two need to be reviewed by the adult sponsor. Then I've worked with the student and we've discussed the possible risks involved in the project. Once you've done so, you can check box 3. Box 4, the project involves one or more of the following and requires prior approval by an SRC, IRB, IACUC, or IBC. So if the project involves humans, vertebrate animals, potentially hazardous biological agents, microorganisms, RDNA, or tissues, you will check all of the boxes that apply, and then you will check box 4 when you're done. And then items to be completed for all projects. Again, for all projects. This is the first one, adult sponsor checklist, which is Form 1, this form. Next one is student checklist, which is Form 1A again, this form. And the research plan or project summary, which is also with the student checklist form. Here are the instructions. And then the approval form, which is found on page 33, is Form 1B. It looks like this. So once all these are done, you can check the boxes. And then the regulated research institutional or industrial setting form, which is Form 1C, needs to be completed when applicable and after the completed experiment. So Form 1C can be found on pages 34 and 35, and it looks like this. And then the continuation or research progression form, which is Form 7, can be found on page 44. It looks like this, and it needs to be completed when applicable. And check box 5 when you're done. Then additional forms required if the project involves the use of one or more of the following, and you check all that apply. So these are in addition to submitting all required ISEF forms in box 5. So additionally, if the student's project involves humans, including student-designed inventions or prototypes, then you will check this box, and it will require prior approval by an IRB, and you can find all the rules for this on pages 8 through 10. So the first form for humans is the human participants form, which is Form 4, found on page 38. Looks like this. The human participants form, or appropriate institutional IRB documentation. And you'll check that box when it's done. Then the sample of informed consent form, which can be found on page 39. It looks like this. Sample of informed consent form. And it is required when applicable and or required by the IRB. Check that box when it's done. And then the qualified scientist form, Form 2, when applicable and are required by the IRB. And Form 2 can be found on page 36. It looks like this. Check the box when you're done. And then if the project involves the vertebrate animals, it requires prior approval, and you can find all the rules on pages 12 through 14. So if the project involves vertebrate animals, check this box. And then Form 5A or 5B will need to be completed. So if the project is conducted in a school, home, or field research site, then you'll have to do 5A. And if the project is conducted at a regulated research institution, then you'll have to do Form 5B. So for 5A, it will require SRC prior approval, and you can find Form 5A on page 40. It looks like this, vertebrate animal form. Or if you need to do 5B, it will require IACUC prior approval, and you can find Form 5B on page 41. So 5B looks like this, vertebrate animal form 5B. And then the qualified scientist form, required for all vertebrate animal projects at a regulated research site or when applicable. So the qualified scientist form is Form 2, again on page 36. Looks like this, qualified scientist form, and you'll check that box when it's done. Moving on, if the project involves potentially hazardous biological agents, then you'll check this box, and it will require prior approval by SRC, IACUC, or IBC. And you can find all the rules on page 15 through 17. So, you will have to complete the potentially hazardous biological agents risk assessment form, which is Form 6A on page 42. So 6A looks like this. You check that box when it's done. And then the human and vertebrate animal tissue form, which is Form 6B, found on page 43, or 43, and is to be completed in addition to Form 6A when the project involves the use of fresh or frozen tissue, primary cell cultures, blood products, and body fluids. So Form 6B can be found on page 43. It looks like this. Check this box when it's done. And then when applicable, the qualified scientist form, which is Form 2, found on page 36, looks like this. So when applicable, you have to complete that and check the box when it's done. Then the following are exempt from prior review, but require a risk assessment form, which is Form 3. Projects involving use of protists, archaea, and similar microorganisms. For projects using manure for composting, fuel production, or other non-culturing experiments. Projects using color change coliform water test kits, microbial fuel cells, and projects involving decomposing vertebrate organisms. So if it involves any of those following, then you will have to complete the risk assessment form, which is Form 3, found on page 37. And find Form 3, and it looks like this, risk assessment form. Then, if the student's project involves hazardous chemicals, activities, and devices, then it will have no SRC prior approval required. And you find all the rules on pages 19 through 20, but it still will require the risk assessment form, which is on page 37. It's Form 3. And the qualified scientist form, Form 2, required for projects involving DEA-controlled substances or when applicable. So Form 2 on page 36 looks like this, qualified scientist form. And you can check that box. And then if it has any other thing, then you will just need the risk assessment form, which is Form 3 on page 37. Looks like this. So that is for anything else. Check that box, check that box. Then the adult sponsor's printed name. And I'll just put my name. And sign and date. And then provide a phone number and an email. And that is the completed Form 1 checklist for adult sponsor.